we are not live.
Okay,
But
no
anyway,
worries.
um, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, guys. I don't know what time of the day you are watching this. We are here, George and Juan from My West Solutions. We have a really special guest today, which is Chris Richardson. And the other side, I'm gonna let him introduce himself. We're gonna talk about the public charges and the new rules, what we should expect about these new rules. And I asked you guys a few weeks ago to submit us some of the questions that you might be interested in Chris to answer because he has a lot of experience and he can help us to understand. So,
He's the guy.
yeah, some of the questions are here, but I'm gonna let Chris introduce himself first, and then we continue.
Sure. My name is Chris Richardson. I'm the General Counsel and COO of BDB Solutions, which is an employment placement agency in Greenville, South Carolina. I was a U.S. diplomat and a visa officer for 7 or 8 years. I was stationed in Nigeria, Nicaragua, Pakistan, and Spain. And so I was the officer that was enforcing a lot of these rules. And I have lots of friends in the State Department, a lot of friends in Department of Homeland Security. And so I offer a unique insider's perspective on the way officers think about enforcing these rules. I'm also an immigration attorney. So I've been in the immigration field for close to 15 years now, both inside and outside of government.
Nice, nice. So as you can see, a really strong background to help us understand better the entire situation. So, Chris, what like general thoughts? You wrote a really nice article in Washington Post. I read it, but
Thank you.
just like an overview for everybody
Okay.
about these new rules and regulations.
Okay. So the old rule is that officers both abroad in embassies and at USCIS would measure whether a person was quote unquote likely to become a public charge. And what that basically means in the most basic terms is this person likely to use government benefits and therefore we should bar their entry into the United States. And obviously, one of the ways to show that a person is likely to use public benefits is if they use public benefits before. And so that's probably one of the highest things. It's like, well, if you use Medicaid before, you're likely to use it again. And so what officers would do is that they would use what's called a totality of the circumstances test, where they would measure whether, you have used benefits before, what kind of benefits you've used before, and they would measure that against the job you were going to do in the United States. Also like how your age is a factor, your educational experience is a factor. They would basically measure all of these things to decide whether you're going to be a public charge or not. When I was a visa officer, we generally only use the public charge for pretty extreme circumstances of people actually using not even Medicaid, but like other benefits like welfare, essentially. Welfare basically but there was always a general understanding that the use of Medicaid, Medicare, any kind of health-related benefits wouldn't be included. What the new rules basically say is that starting October 15th, instead of the old the four government services basically being considered likely to become a public charge. So in the old days, if you had been on SSI, which is, the Social Security Supplemental Insurance, welfare, state or local cash assistance programs, or any kind of public assistance for long-term care, like let's say that you're going to be under Medicaid or Medicare for a really, really long time, or Medicaid for a really, really long time, those things would be considered benefits that you use in the past that would lead us to believe as officers that you would likely use them again in the future, and therefore you would be ineligible from entering the U.S. What the new rules basically say is that first, it changes the very definition of what's public charge, because that never really was defined before. And what this new rule basically says is, and I'm going to read it for you, that any alien who receives one or more public benefits for more than 12 months in the aggregate within any 36-month period. And so basically what that means is that if you use any of the 9 programs, that counts against you. And if you use those programs for more than a year, then you're likely to be considered a public charge, and therefore you'd be inadmissible from entering the U.S. But what the tricky thing about this rule is that if you use, for example, two benefits, then those benefits count against you as a month. So let's say in 1 month you use both welfare and SSI. That 1 month now counts as 2 months. And so the rule has a way of capturing a lot more people. And instead of using the 4 or 5 things that we used to use before, they also added non-emergency Medicaid, Section 8 housing vouchers, subsidized public housing, SNAP, which is like food stamps essentially, and SSI, welfare, that stuff is still on there. So basically, instead of the 4 or 5 things that they used to measure as likely to become public charge, now any history of using public housing, rental assistance, food stamps, or Medicaid will now count against you. There are some like key exceptions to this. So let's say that your child is on Medicaid. That doesn't count against you. Let's say you had to use Medicaid for an emergency purpose. That doesn't count against you. Let's say that you needed Obamacare, subsidized healthcare. That also does not count on this. And so we get a lot of questions. And I think one of your questions was about Obamacare. And Obamacare isn't considered. Now, if you get Medicaid through Obamacare, then that does count against you. But if it's just like a subsidized Obamacare healthcare, that doesn't count against you for the purposes of the public charge. It doesn't help you, but it doesn't hurt you either for the purposes of the public charge.
Great. So I believe that you get like a great big. One's gonna ask the first question for Sergio. Sergio is one of the subscribers and clients here, and he sent a question. I believe with these bases you sent to us, but you already touched a little bit bases here. But let's go question by question. So,
but it is good to continue with those examples. For example, so you said that food stamps is gonna count on you. I mean, it's gonna count against you. Sorry. Right. Medicaid, Medicare, certain cases apply for it. You just say it. People can rewind and check these ones.
Sure.
Let's say hurricane relief funds. This is just one time that happened. Very specifically, it's not going to count against you, right?
No. So any kind of disaster or emergency aid does not count against you. So like, let's say you got affected by Hurricane Dorian and you took government assistance for that. That technically is not supposed to count against you. Let's say you were in a car accident and you needed to use Medicaid during that car accident, or you had you were pregnant and had a child. That stuff doesn't count against you.
Yes.
That stuff doesn't count against you. Let's say that you enroll your child. I know one question you had was about enrolling children in school. That also does not count against you. In fact, you're required to enroll your children in school, and the government is not going to we're not at that point yet where we would punish you for doing that.
Okay. Let's continue. Renting subsidies.
Yes, rental subsidies is one of those things now that in certain circumstances would actually count against you. I think if you use Section 8, if it's a Section 8 based rental assistance, like if they use Section 8, which is a government program, that would count against you as something that would be in the totality of the circumstances test to be heavily weighted against you, the use of rental housing assistance.
So first home buyers is only for residents. Okay, this one. School meal support, like those additional things.
No. School meals, anything that really does with school and children and education, that's not going to count against you. If it's your children that are even if your children use Medicaid or Medicaid or TANF, or if it's just the children, that stuff doesn't count against you as the parent. And it doesn't count against the children either, but it certainly doesn't count against the parent. And so if you find yourself in a situation where your children need school lunches or they need assistance at the school, that stuff won't count against you for the purposes of the public charge.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah, we had a list and we were talking before the live stream, so we were concerned about them. I mean, our clients, they were prospects, they were asking about it. So,
I believe you asked already the Sergio question, which is about Sergio's already moving in EB3 with My Life Solutions and BDV, and he's already waiting for I-140 approval. But he was worried about the Obamacare and the kid in the schools. and
Mhm.
it could be a problem. I believe you already answered that.
Yeah. And in fact, I know that there's some question about this October 15th deadline. And I don't think that that is 100%. We'll see if that actually happens. There might be a chance that one of many courts might intervene on that. But remember that, so it counts for any benefits you use after October 15th, right? And so anything you use before October 15th doesn't necessarily count against you. And so, for people who are already in the pipeline with cases, I wouldn't be as concerned, because by the time they reach by the time they get their green card, they'll still have been probably less than the 12-month aggregate time anyway, if that makes sense. So like, it really is like, let's say that you use Medicaid on October 15th. Okay, that's bad, but remember, it has to be 12 months of that use, right? And so it's not just that, I use Medicaid in October, November, December, and then I do my interview and I get my green card. Then it's not going to count against you. Don't think about October 15th, 2019. Think about October 15th, 2020.
Yeah.
Because then you will have a year basically of use. And so even after October 15th, if you're still using Medicaid, you're still using these benefits, think about finding ways to wind down use of those benefits, but you don't have to cancel those benefits immediately on October 15th. Remember that it's not just the one thing, right? Like, it's still the totality of the circumstances test that the government and the visa officers are going to use when they interview somebody.
Yeah, great. Please go ahead.
Yeah, the second one is, could a person who changes its status from B1 to F1 have a problem? What will be the worst problems related to background checks on this scenario?
So if a person come here, basically
getting to the country
with
as a
tourists, and then they adjust the status to go to a university or a school.
Right. In terms of like the public charge, or just in general?
I believe it's general scenario.
In general, yeah. So in general, this happens all the time. When I was a visa officer and in the government, people often change their status from B1 to F1 here in the country. I think that the government would prefer that you actually go out and do your visa interview at your embassy. And there's no telling if that won't become more difficult in the future. But in general, I think that the government would like people to do their B1, go back out, do their F1 in their home country. But it isn't like, it's not unusual that people change their status from B1 to F, or B to H1B, or F, well, actually F to H1B is more probable. So those things happen.
Okay. So I believe you answered already Marciele Lifonso, and you already answered Mauri Ribeiro, because we already talked about food stamp, we already talked Medicaid, hurricane relief funds,
giving birth,
renting subsidies, school meals. We talk about all this stuff, and I believe you said
very clear. It's very clear, your information as always.
Yeah, no worries, guys. No worries. And you got a question about truck drivers too, right?
Yeah, this is a truck driver. It's about like it's like a wave. It's coming like a wave for us. We hear questions about this every single day now.
So
this is basically
technically truck driving could count as EB3 unskilled, because there's no 2-year requirement that you get some kind of special training. The problem is in the timing. Like, how do you make it work for timing? So, at the time of application, the job should be that someone has a commercial license. They should get all this hazard training. They should have a US license. There's a lot, like VDV, for example, doesn't do them. I know other companies do them, but we don't do them because the timing is really tricky. Is it possible? Yeah. You would basically have to find a trucking company that would advertise without a CDL license and without those things. And basically say that the person is starting off as like not a truck driver, but maybe a driver helper in the beginning, and then maybe converting later to a truck driver. So I can see scenarios where it is certainly possible that it can happen. And certainly by law, if you're just looking at the basic definition of, is this an unskilled job? I think it would be considered an unskilled job. It's just a matter of the timing of it, would be really difficult for the labor certification process and for the immigrant visa process. So I guess in theory, like if you weren't actually living in the country, it would be almost impossible, right? Because how is it that you're going to qualify for this job without a U.S. driver's license and a U.S. commercial driver's license? And in some states, you actually have to be a resident, a permanent resident, at the very least, to get that commercial driver's license. And so
the course takes months, a lot.
Right, and the course takes months, and so you have to find like the right trucking company for the right time. You probably would have to be in the United States on a visa status already. It's a really, really tricky thing, and only for a really narrow amount of potential clients. And so, but I do think it is possible. It's just a matter of you'd have to sit down and just be like, okay, so I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to make this work and make the timing work. But obviously these days with the U.S. government, that's a big risk because you're dealing with timing issues.
Yeah.
And, you know, we've seen so many delays on other things, delays we never expected, that, you know, I would be very reluctant to get involved in something like that just because I don't know what the timing would be. So, yeah.
Yeah, we always advise our clients, like, do exhaustive, you know, really deep research about the sponsors, about the companies that are providing the project itself, and also a review from clients. This is really important.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah,
all right,
man, I believe it was a great meeting, a great interview.
For sure. Thanks, guys.
I appreciate. I just have to say thank you.
Yeah,
all the subscribers and the viewers here probably saying the same. Thank you for the information.
No problem.
And if you like things like this, please subscribe to this channel, because we're gonna be like talking with really like fun-based people, like people that knows what they're talking about, and they come with really powerful knowledge. So don't forget to subscribe, give a like button for us, and share this video. Thank you very much, and I see you soon in the next video.
All right, thanks, guys. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.